Do.Did.Will, the Story of People podcast, with one of my favorites, Erica M. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's great. I'm glad you made the time. I know you're busy. It is absolutely frantic over there right now with Much Music Land and the documentary and all these things that are coming out. So I'd imagine you're getting pulled in a bunch of directions. So thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it. So
Well, I promised you, you asked me several months ago, and I said, not yet. And you showed up again at my virtual front door, and I had made a promise to you. So here we are.
is that press schedule getting a little bonkers for you right now?
No, no.
No.
The press schedule has been shared equally by a lot of the on air people and the director of the Much Music documentary. So we've been sharing the load. And we're also doing it chunk by chunk because a lot of the press was done nationally for the big Roy Thompson Hall Canadian premiere that happened last week.
Yeah.
And so it was significantly more intensive at that time. And now we're going to start doing more local publicity because there's going to be a cross Canada tour. And there'll be a lot of, I'm hoping, local media outlets, at least the few that are still left, and we'll be able to talk about the documentary then.
So we'll dive into the documentary. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about for everyone listening and watching. There's a documentary coming out about Much Music and 299 Queen Street, which was iconic for my demo of kids growing up in Canada. It was such a integral part to our youth and growing up and coming through that space. Much Music was our MTV, and along with it came all the personalities that we grew up in, and also just you were as important to the music and to the videos as it was the other way to the programming keeping you guys on the air. It was all about the personalities for us, and we have one of them with us today, and Erica M, who you crossed over a ton of different shows at that time. I think everyone was probably hosting and doing a bunch of different things to keep it going. But that building and that iconic corner and everything that was going on there is as much a part of Canadian culture as Mr. Dress Up, Fred Penner, the Beachcombers, the CBC, just all the stuff that we all grew up on. It's all very much a part of it. So this is wonderful to be able to catch up and talk. So as we dive into this thing, this show is all about three categories about what you do, what you did, and what you will. So for now, let's introduce you to everybody. Erica M, what do you do?
Well, I do a lot of different things. I'm a storyteller. I'm a content creator. I like to use my voice to make really good things happen. So I get involved in projects where my voice can make a difference. Sometimes it's publishing, sometimes it's on camera, sometimes it's podcasts, a lot of advertising, branded marketing. My skills are eclectic and varied, but there is a consistency in storytelling, in respecting the audience, and being authentic and compelling.
So the switch from coming off the air, like video wise, as far as like when Much Music, went to a lot of just straight video format for a long time. There was a point there where all the VJs started, we started losing you guys. You started, it wasn't about the on air talent anymore. It was videos and content. And then it got away from music altogether and went to like game shows and then The Simpsons. And then it just kind of did the whole kind of jumbledness after all the personalities moved on. Was that a difficult kind of moment to kind of leave that space and then have to carve out a new kind of space after being known so well for so long? Because this new world that we're in right now of content creation, and I call it new because video and podcasting and stuff is still to me relative infancy compared to television and what it was back in the day. So there wasn't as many options back then to be seen on film and being out there and being back in the public. What was that transition like coming out of there and then having to carve out a new career?
Well, I left when Much Music was at its heyday, but I was done. I had been there for 13 years and I just needed to explore. I just needed to do something different. I grew up at Much Music,
Yeah.
and in my early 30s, I had to test myself. So I wanted to throw myself out there and see what I could do. And you're right, there wasn't a lot available out there, so I made my own. What a lot of people don't realize is working at Much Music back in the day was an incredible gift because it was scrappy. Didn't have a lot of money, but it had oodles of creativity. We had all the freedom in the world to create whatever it is that we wanted. So I learned to be entrepreneurial, although I believe it was part of it in my DNA anyway. But I learned to be scrappy. I learned to create community. I learned to respect an audience. I learned to be able to speak publicly anywhere because I did live TV
Yeah.
for 10 years, for 4 hours every day without a script. Um, Basically, I was doing what Second City does in many ways, which is just go with the flow and be entertaining in the moment. So acquired so many skills that I didn't even understand that I had. I was also a writer, partly because when you are on the fly introducing bands or videos, they it required storytelling. You
Hmm.
had to learn how to tell stories to keep the audience entertained and engaged. So when I left Much Music, I did a lot of different TV shows and I hosted television and radio, but really the the real superpower, I guess, was for me to notice this opportunity of media that was opening up in a grassroots way. So I had sold a show to Life Network. It was called Yummy Mummy Club when I was pregnant, and I wanted to talk about the world of motherhood from the perspective of a very urban woman who was having a difficult time adjusting to motherhood. And I hosted that show, I co produced it, I wrote it. And after 2 years, and after it was distributed around the world, the show ended. And so I took advantage of that space and I built a tiny little website called Yummy Mummy Club. And over the years, I harnessed the power of the internet and social media, the power of women who are often marginalized because they are, in quotation marks, moms and therefore less interesting. While I knew that women with kids are an army of talent who just wants to partly stay home with their kids, but they all have careers
Yeah.
and careers that they had put on hold to raise their kids. So I said to them, well, you can do both with me. And so we built the most well known online property for moms by moms in the country. And in doing so, we built a marketing agency where we worked with brands to connect them with moms with compelling storytelling told by moms for moms. And the company still runs today. I ran it for 15 years, sold it last year to Toys R Us. I
Oh,
still oversee it. And it's a really special, safe place where women actually have a voice. Now, keep in mind that when I launched this 15 years ago, most women didn't have their own social properties. Now, it's a different world out there. And so YMC is more of a meeting place for moms. And it's a place that attracts a lot of different people. It's a tapestry of voices, as opposed to people who have their just one social platform. But I am just so proud to have created this and to have launched the careers of so many talented women who today make a living in this space because they started at YMC and they were
that
able
that
to raise
amazing.
their kids at the same time. And we all worked from home in a time that was, unthinkable. We were trailblazers. We won all
Yeah.
kinds of awards for innovation and branded content. Um, and a lot of that I learned because of what I learned at Much Music.
I mean, it felt to me as the watcher that it was definitely, like a not a Saturday Night Live vibe, but you did touch on it with SCTV where it was a lot of like, all right, it almost felt like you guys got to do whatever you wanted, and I don't mean that, like, let off the
No,
leash,
actually, we did.
college
No,
dorm. It
actually,
was
we
just
did.
like,
We
show up
did.
and just, "What do you wanna
We
do
did.
today?"
No,
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't even
amazing.
ask. We just did it. No,
That
seriously,
must
like you can't even imagine the freedom that we had, and the trust and the encouragement. And I know that you talk about what do I do and what I did, but what I do is I do a lot of keynotes about what I did. And the keynote is what you can learn about innovation today from Much Music in the 80s. Because
mm,
what we did at Much Music in many ways was so groundbreaking, it's still ahead of its curve. Most corporations still don't incorporate so many of the key things that Moses Znaimer had initiated with Much Music, which made it such a hotbed of creativity. And part of it was this thing, we actually have a word for it in this day and age, but back in the day, there was no word for it, which is entrepreneurship, which
mm,
means inspiring people who work within an industry to feel a sense of ownership for the company so that we feel that our input is valuable and that we're engaged and what we create will change the direction of the company. And that was 100% accurate. And it's why people never wanted to leave. It's not
mm.
because it was TV, because a lot of people leave their jobs in television. We stayed at Much Music because our bosses said to us, here is here's your drawing board, here's your playpen, here's your area, here's your cameras, here's your lights, here's your sound, just go and be you. And I think there's a huge lesson for organizations and companies to learn from that, which is when you micromanage your people, they feel disengaged. When you open up the opportunities and treat people with respect, listen to their ideas, and make their ideas happen, um, you will have an engaged workforce who won't leave and take your IP with them. It's interesting. I went to hear someone speak. I can talk forever, by the way. Just stop me if you want, but my brain
It's all good. We're here to
doesn't
listen.
stop. And
We're here to listen and
I
learn.
went to hear Steve Shadelsky speak. He just wrote a book called The Speak Up Culture, which is essentially what we had at Much Music, which was we were able to speak up, uh, share our ideas amongst our peers, and then build it. And very rarely were we stopped. And there is sort of a movement now amongst business coaches and leadership coaches to encourage leaders to be more open to respecting their staff and giving them a voice in the current company and the future of the company as well.
I think it's extremely crucial for that to let, especially creative minds. Are you kidding? Like, I can't. I was just what you were touching on earlier about that it was a wide open. You could do whatever you wanted. That must have been nerve wracking for you guys, but also refreshing and freeing because you could just kind of go and maybe if there was no threat of being fired outside of doing something ridiculous that would get you fired, but to the point where you just kind of could run within yourselves and be creative. I 100% believe that that was the reason of success, the success of Much
Mhm.
Music and the
Mhm.
personalities and everybody because uh, we just felt like we knew all of you,
Yes, I
which
think
doesn't
that's
happen. It
no,
doesn't
you're
happen in
right.
music. It doesn't happen in music right now
Yeah.
either. Like no one knows who any band members are of any band anymore. And
Well, I think the key to success in the public space is to be comfortable being unabashedly yourself. And to know who you are, to have purpose in life, to understand what your values are. And when you have that kind of path, then you can say anything because you're being true to who you are.
Mm.
And I feel like the other night when I sat on stage with Sukyin, Denise Donlin, Rick Campanelli, Monica Diol, Michael Williams, Steve Anthony, we sat together with the director Sean Menard, and I looked at that team of people, and there are obviously so many other people who were huge stars and huge influences, people on camera, part of the on camera team at Much, but we were all so unique. And we were
Mm.
hired because of our personalities. We were not hired because we were broadcasters, because the conceit is that anybody can be trained to be a broadcaster and sound like anybody else. But very few people have that certain it factor, who know themselves, who have passion, in this case, about music, and are burning to talk about it. Those are the people who were on camera on Much. And they came from all different parts of Much Music: camera people, receptionists,
Mhm.
reporters, editors. They all ended up on air because their passion, their interest shone through. And so they went, okay, you go on now. And that's another really interesting thing that um, people who run corporations can really learn from, which is to not pigeonhole your staff. Because once you train someone in the values of your business, if they feel that they can add somewhere else, give them a shot, even though they may not be trained for it.
Yeah.
If they are good at the previous job, give them a chance to grow, and let them grow with the company. It's very exciting. And then again, people feel invested. And that's where the loyalty is.
As the listener and the watcher as well, because you see everyone like the cameraman or a woman or receptionist being included in the show. So
Mhm.
you're invested in every single person that's there. You're like, "Oh, I want to see what they're doing today. What are you eating at your desk?" "Oh, I've got some noodles from down the street." There was nothing like that going on. It was corporate this, corporate that, and there was some fun with SCTV. There was some fun with Saturday Night Live. There was some fun with this with Kids in the Hall. There was some looseness to some of that stuff, but we didn't really get that as the casual list of the watcher. I mean, we
No,
I would come home from school at 3:30 and it would be Much Music on for like 4.5 hours, and it was tuning into the VJs as much it was the music. Now,
of
you
course.
touched
And
earlier
but I'm
about
just going to
yeah,
tell you something, that when I was at the screening and there was a red carpet, people were, it was very surreal, screaming out my name, screaming out Rick Campanelli's, "Hey, Rick, the temp, look at me," and people taking our photographs because they grew up with us. They felt they knew us because they had watched us
yeah,
evolve from, the um, early hosts who didn't have a lot of broadcast skills, and they grew up with us until we all became seasoned broadcasters and sort of leaders in Canadian culture. So we're connected. We're almost like
mhm.
family.
We are. I mean,
Mhm.
we are. When someone leaves, especially when you get that connected with people and then they leave, you're like, "What? What are we gonna do now between 4 and 5?" Like, it's just we were programmed back then to follow you, and then we would, go there, and also all the big video debuts came out of there. All these very cool things were happening, and that was for us burb kids. I mean, I grew up way outside of Toronto, up close to, like, Port Perry, Lindsay kind of area. There was like 4 channels, and when we got cable, the first channel I put on was Much Music. My
you
friends
have
had
to
it,
you have
you
to
know?
understand also that, aside from talking about the personalities and the effect that we may have personally had on you, there was also something about being curators of Canadian culture.
Mhm.
So it was a beautiful moment in the Canadian music and art scene, because kids in Vancouver and Victoria, BC were seeing the same videos as kids who were living in PEI and Newfoundland. And there was a star system that started to emerge of
Mhm.
Canadian talent that was grown through much music, through
Yep.
the videos that we chose to play. And that created an industry and Canadian culture. And I feel like now, um, because there are things like TikTok and YouTube, all these different platforms, which I actually love.
Mhm.
But the difference is that there's no one curating all of this. It's all self-curating. So kids have to find someone that they like on YouTube or TikTok, and then they follow them. But what Much Music did is it curated. It brought, say, 10, 15 different on-air people on at a time, and then played a bunch of music. So you didn't have to curate it. We did it for you.
Yeah.
And people like Strombo or whoever gave you context to the music, which again is really hard to get now. So I'm not saying like those were the good old days and now media sucks. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's different.
Yeah.
And I think what we're missing, or what young people are missing right now, is a sense of cohesion and one place where everybody can connect and be on the same page, and therefore feel a sense of oneness. And it's no surprise that our country is splintering,
Mhm.
because there's no media that's bringing it together. And it's happening more and more as large scale, call it mainstream media, starts to crumble, because they really were not innovative, and they didn't come up with new ways of using technology to bring the country together. I think now we're culturally paying a price for it.
I agree. I 100% agree. I mean, I have a hell of an opportunity with this network with Crier. It's kind of a free for all kind of same thing where we're allowed to just do what we want and create what we want. I'm just a guy that grew up in Ontario in a basement that has a
Mhm.
show like everybody else, but I get to have and tell these stories, and it's given me a platform to do that. I think we need more of them.
Mhm.
And it brings a sense of community together.
Mhm.
Earlier, you talked about um, coming in there, not being journalists or broadcasters, given an opportunity. So I want to dive in a little bit on the how did you do it part, and this can be, it can include all the stuff you've been doing as far as speaking and going from there into, from Much Music into the next phase. But that initial getting hired at Much Music and then told, basically saying, okay, go. How did you do it? How did that start for you?
I failed. Then I failed some more. Then I failed some more,
Yeah.
cried, and talked to people, watched my shows back, and then basically I taught myself how to be on camera. It was a very painful experience, but I got really damn good at it. So now I can be anywhere. I can interview anyone. I can speak live anywhere. I can hold an audience's attention anywhere, because I really had the school of hard knocks, learning my craft in front of a country. It was really hard. And, in a way, it was really mean of my bosses to just throw me
Mhm.
out there at 23 years old with
Sure.
no script, no training, and going on live TV. But I feel like Canada forgave me, and I think they found it endearing, because aren't we just so tired of all these picture perfect people who look perfect, they sound perfect, they always have the exact right thing to say. And I think that a lot of people saw themselves in me because I was human. And I keep that part of me alive. I don't need to be perfect. And I feel like that's what connects people to me and to a lot of the former on-air people, is that we understand that there is no such thing as perfection. Perfection's boring.
Mhm.
So yes, I learned along the way, but I also didn't learn too much. I didn't. I'm not like this, you know, picture perfect broadcaster. I don't think I would be really good on the CBC, nor would what I would want to, because it would sublimate who I am.
Did you apply? Do you apply? Did they have like a we're looking for on-air talent? How
They
did you
did.
actually get the gig?
Oh, for me, it's a long story. I was working in the music business from the time I was 16 years old. While I was going to college and going to university, I worked at Shom FM as the music librarian. I worked at clubs. I was working at Blues and Broadway Live as
Well,
the DJ when I was 18, 19 years old. I worked at Sam the Record Man and A&A Records at the same time. I managed bands. I lived the life. And then I went to university, studied media communications, and worked at the local record store at the same time to make some money. And then I got a job answering, excuse me, the phone. I'm just,
that's fine.
I don't even have any water. Hold on a
Oh,
sec.
no.
So I got a, ooh, I have a frog in my throat. I got a job answering the phones for the new music, which was
Oh, yeah.
the coolest show um, almost in the world on music. And then I became the music coordinator for that office, and I was booking the acts for the new music and city TV entertainment. At the same time, I was working nights and weekends as a host on cable company entertainment show.
Wow.
And after 3 years, I made a demo tape. They put me on. So every one of the people who you see on Much Music has a story like that. No one was just a broadcaster. Everyone has a story of how they got there. In fact, that's what my podcast is all about, reinvention of the VJ, which is I consciously reached out to, now I've spoken to 20 of the people who were on air on Much Music. I talked to them about what is the actual story of how you got your job on Much Music? What was your experience working at Much Music? Because for me, it was really great and really terrible. So I wanted to hear other people's experience. And then I talked to them about how, because everybody left Much Music. So, how did you take the skills that you learned at Much and maybe the attention or whatever it is that you gained working at Much Music? How did you take it and apply it to your other future jobs? Similar to what you're asking me, but it was sort of replicated over and over with different people. So when you listen to all the stories, you'll see some common threads,
Yeah.
um, also a lot of surprises, and you'll understand that it it's hard work. It's hard
Oh,
work what we did, and everybody earned their right to be there.
isn't it? I pay attention to what it's funny, and I rarely do this for anybody, but I pay attention to what everyone was doing. Sorry, that everyone's doing now from that time, or try to at least
Mhm.
keep an eye on what everyone's doing. There was something iconic about going into that building too. I was tour managing bands 98 to like 2003 ish.
Mhm.
So it was still going. There was still the performances that were happening. And when you went in there, it had this sense of, family, and it was just this cool, like you couldn't
And
wait to actually,
chaos.
and
And
chaos.
chaos.
But there was so many people that you would meet that just made time for you. Like no one was like, you would go in, we would go in, the band would be setting up, Master T's over there, you're over there, George is here. If someone's eating food and someone's writing stuff, there was no closed off area. It was just all open. And
It's
it was
called
such a cool
it's called
experience.
the living movie.
Yeah.
That was what Moses's vision was,
Yeah.
is the living movie. And
Mhm.
when he built and refurbished 299 Queen Street West, which is the name of the documentary about Much Music, and that's why they called it that, or Sean Menard called it that, was because the building itself is sort of a metaphor for the innovation that Moses embedded in his vision. He literally purpose built uh, a building with no studios, but just spaces and what he calls the environment, where there were wires and plugs and lighting grids,
Mm.
sound plugins everywhere. So the entire building was the studio, and which made it entertaining and surprising. And you really got to see the inner workings in the background of all the shots.
It made it totally, relatable too, because
Hmm.
you could see guys working on, or girls or whoever, working
Hmm.
on their stuff, but also working on the panels in the back. Oh, that they have to fix that wire, they're drywalling. It was it was amazing. It was such a
Hmm.
great vibe. When you started and they finally gave you that chance to be on air, who was around then? Because a bunch of people got added, but who was sort of there on your first day, that
My
that
mentor was JD Roberts.
oh, yeah.
He was my guy. He is the one who said, this is how you prepare for a show. This is how you present yourself. This is the kind of work ethic you need, um, because the different on-air people had different styles, different approaches. Um, I followed his way of working, which was always be prepared, always come early, take it seriously, be entertaining when you're on the air, but behind the scenes, lots of hard work and organization. So I was the second girl. The first girl was Catherine McClenahan, and Catherine was on for a couple of months. And when she left, a few months later, they were looking for someone else. And that's when I started. So I was in 1985, which is,
Mhm.
I think I was on 9 months after they went live.
I was gonna say you were part of the early group there,
Yes.
and then people started coming in after that. And then, and you look at it, getting back to my part about people's careers. I mean, you look at where George is gone from there, yourself. You look at where JD's gone from there. Some people that have just decided to stay in it. It really launched the careers of a lot of people into different things as
Yep.
well, in different stratospheres, which is a whole other podcast. And I'm sure they're going to talk about it in the documentary. But it's just
No,
like
that's what my
it's
podcast
incredible.
is.
I
And
know
it's
it's
interesting
amazing.
because when Sean Menard reached out to me to be in the podcast, I was the first person that he reached out to. And I was so impressed with him as a person that I said, well, not only will I be in your documentary, but I want to help you. So I
Amazing.
ended up becoming the consulting producer of the documentary. And I gave him my podcast to listen to. So he basically um, based the initial premise of the movie and the who he was going to interview after listening to the podcast, because he got a sense of who people's personalities were, what their trajectories were like, and who might have been the key figures in the different eras of Much that
Mhm.
he was trying to capture.
So you're doing a lot of things. Obviously, you've carved out a completely brand new career. But with the documentary coming out, and the profile that it's brought back to that location, so the will part, what will you do next? But I want to ask a first question about that, which is, do you think Much Music should return in that format, and could it survive in today's world?
That's an interesting question, and that was asked in the audience. I think actually Ed the Sock asked that question, funny enough. And I think he asked Denise. I don't think it could survive in the exact same way. But I do think that there is an opportunity. Well, there's two things. Do people our age want to watch Much Music again? Yes. So are you asking, do I think that there is space or a place to replay some of the old videos from back there and the old interviews and have some of the old, yet young looking hosts introduce those videos? I think that that would be a really astute business decision for by the people who own all the footage, because it's just sitting in like a library in the dank building at 299 West right now. Do I think that this could be replicated for young people today? No. But I do think that someone needs to come up with a place, a space, virtual or otherwise, that brings Canadian youth together to enjoy music, learn about music, have relevant conversations, and potentially be the place where youth come together in this country, because there is nowhere now for them. And as I mentioned earlier, I feel like it's a really bad thing for our country.
Music is an interesting one. I've got 2 kids, 15, 13. They consume I'm trying very much to have them consume full records. It is definitely a one hit kind of thing and out, but, in my business, as far as the touring business goes, there is going to be, in my opinion, a serious lack of stadium and arena acts, if it's not already, that will sustain. All the kids have a big hit on TikTok right now. They all go do one arena show. Will come back and do it twice? Like,
Yeah, but okay.
and
I don't want to sound like we're old people, number one, because, oh, the good old days. But let's
well, I know it's
also think
evolved.
about, there's a
Yeah,
business model here, which I think is not sustainable, which is now the cost to buy a ticket is so outrageous that no one young can afford to buy tickets anymore. So I don't think that it's necessarily the fault of the kind of music the kids are listening to, because they do find bands that they love,
sure.
but the barrier to entry is so high,
Yeah.
and the battle to buy tickets, the number of I don't know, bots or whoever it is that is buying the tickets. I know that you work with Live End. They're fucked. I'm sorry, but
It's
it is a
it's a
really,
problem.
really corrupt and unfair situation, which is turning people off from going to concerts. So I think that we need someone who will do it fairly, where people can start to buy tickets like the good old days, in some way where it's more fair, and people can't buy up 100 and 200 tickets and then jack the price and have the seller reap the profits of the
Mhm.
jacked up things. Like, it's like the the like live end is in on this scam. So, and you better not cut this out.
I don't edit.
Okay.
I don't
because
edit. I don't edit.
because this is a major problem, and some of the big artists are starting to speak out, and they're trying to do something about it. But until that problem gets solved, you're right. The stadium shows are going to start to suffer because we, the consumers, are getting sick of it.
There's an interesting part about that discussion, and I'm fully on board with the bot problem. I know that they're addressing it in Congress in America right now. I know that they're addressing it
Mm.
up in all parts of it. It's an interesting part because part of the show thing that we're seeing is the all the artists are going for it. They're giving us a ton of production, and Kiss were doing it. Everyone has been doing it. They've been doing a
Hmm.
ton of production. So touring has gotten very expensive for the artist. I'm always interested right now when you're coming out of the pandemic, especially, or when you're coming out of one of these situations where you almost have to strip it back down and go, okay. we need to get them back in. So we need a $20 ticket. We need we need an ability to do that. I was thinking the other day about the first time I saw a $100 concert ticket. Do you remember that? It wasn't it wasn't as it was like it was almost late 80s, early 90s. We were seeing it with probably a Madonna or potentially a U2 or whatever it was, but there was that first $100 concert ticket, and I was thinking we still have tickets under 100
Yeah,
bucks.
but
We
the
still have the
problem
50
is,
and the 40s,
I'm going
but
to
they need
interrupt you because the problem is not the
sure.
original price of the ticket. It's the
Oh, I agree.
resellers and the platform where Live End sells a ticket for $200 to go see Taylor Swift or something like that, which is somewhat reasonable. But they're allowing all these bots to buy these tickets and then the same day sell them for $1,600. That is illegal. And they're adding because they get a
That's a
cut
problem.
of that money. So it's terrible.
So it's an interesting how do I explain it? It's an interesting market and it's an interesting process because ultimately the ticket price starts with the artist because it has to go through some
Mhm, mhm.
channels before it goes. And no artist wants to, you know, go for it. They don't want to uh gouge the fans. Now the other part of it that's very interesting is that where Taylor took on a very cool sorry, let me reframe that cool approach. The fact that she knew that her tickets were going to be sold at a super high premium. So she ended up just going to that price right away, which eliminated that secondary market, eliminated, people selling them on the street. Well, remember, we used to go to concerts or we used to line up at Sunrise Records or Ticketmaster or whatever it was, and you'd still have somebody that buy $100 ticket or a $50 ticket and then turn around and sell it to somebody in line
Yes,
for
but
75. It was more hand to hand,
Live End
more
wouldn't
hand
get
to
a cut
hand.
of that. And that's my problem. No,
Well,
they didn't.
I understand. I understand that. I understand that side of where you're going with it. However, there are the price. The bottom line price is the price, and so that's where that gets them in the door. And I agree with you. We absolutely 100% need a reasonable ticket for these kids and people to come into a show like a family of four for even under $100. I totally get it. I know that there are some measures and stuff being put in place now to be able to try to combat that and get it down. I believe we are going to see some improvements here in the next year, especially.
It,
But
but you know what?
it's a tough one, and it doesn't just happen with Ticketmaster.
It's
It's happening with all the
greed.
ticketing
It's
platforms.
just greed. It's greed from the middlemen, not from the artists. The artists are struggling because they're not making money selling records like they used to. So
Oh,
they're
I know, it's a
touring in
shame.
order to make
I wish they
money.
would.
And then these middlemen, so the the live ents of the world are are the ones that are getting rich on the backs of the musicians and the backs of the fans. So that's my problem. That's the problem that I have with it. And I think that it is having a very damaging effect on the industry on a whole, as a whole. And like I said at the beginning, when you first asked me the question, the future of the music business, I don't think that young people who are not making as much money as they used to, a lot of kids are having a hard time finding jobs now. There's
Hmm.
it's a different economic environment now. It's a harder life now. That they're going to kill the music business is my thinking, and it's short sighted. And much like all the major broadcasters and the record companies, in their arrogance, thought that they were the only game in town. Someone is going to come in. There'll be some upstart, and they're going to come up with a
Hmm.
new system that will be democratic and fair, and they won't get rich the same way, but they'll steal the business away. It's going to happen. Trust me. I don't know who's going to do it, but whenever there's like a huge behemoth, I mean, this is This is innovation. This is the premise of innovation. I read a book called Creativity um, by the person who started Pixar. And he talks about all
Mm.
these big companies, and you could see it in action. It's fascinating. All these big companies who become very rich and very arrogant, who own the industry, um, they they stop watching their backs because they feel like they own it. But what happens is there's a whole bunch of people who are looking up at them and studying their business model, seeing how they're doing it, and saying, I could do that better. And they start really small, and there's many of them, and they start eating away at these people's profits. And then one day, Mr. Livent's going to wake up and go, hey, our profits are down 20%. What happened? And then it's too late because the other ones are, it's like Pac-Man. They're eating, um, they're, they're basically eating the profits of the large conglomerations. It's what um, uh, YouTube did with Much Music, for example.
Mm.
You can study it. You can see broadcasters in their arrogance didn't take into consideration the proliferation of social media and the small guys, the blogs, the storytellers, um, magazine companies who are often owned by the broadcasters also thought that they were the biggest magazines. And in their arrogance, they didn't innovate. And then what happens? I built Yummy Mummy Club and started eating the lunch of today's parent, which was more of a standard magazine. Now, they caught up because they have deep pockets, but they never got back to the level that they were before because of the troublemakers like me and other digital.
I don't call it troublemakers. I think
Well,
it's
yes.
innovative. And I mean the thing is the landscape, especially in media in Canada. Obviously, we have two conglomerates that run everything, but then you have your indies and people that are able to put out content um, on their own with no rules that get lightning in a bottle, and it helps change an industry. So I don't call it bullying. I think that what it is
Yes.
it's innovative. I think everyone has to change it. To your point about broadcasting not evolving, they're feeling it
Mhm.
now. So I mean, all industries. It's funny because it apply
Of
to every
course.
single industry where it goes. And now we just got out of it with
Yeah.
film and TV and with AI and trying to replace background actors. It never like people have to embrace, but they also have to not ignore and then try to find a way to work between the two of them. It's very an interesting part, and which I think is amazing that you've been able to rock the boat like that and take on some like today's parent and have this amazing space for moms and to feel safe and feel great and creative and create this new thing. You can call it disrupting, but I call it innovative,
It
and
was. Oh,
I
yeah,
call
we
it
were
smart. I think
trailblazers. We
it's
were
you know
pioneers. We were disruptors. We were a bunch of moms who worked out of our kitchens across the country and won awards for innovation. We won best, all different kinds of amazing awards. Um, but the real reward was knowing that we had unseated, the mainstream. And it's going to happen to the ticketing industry. That's you heard it here. And it's not like I know who's going to do it, but I think that soon,
I think you're going to see some
yeah,
major changes. I really do.
yeah.
I really do. I mean, I see it on the ground floor, but I also, I get to talk to fans all the time, and we get to have those conversations. So I see a
Good.
change coming. Um,
I bet you didn't think this conversation
and
was
I,
going to be here, right?
but it's okay. This is what podcast, but
Man, Erica is
none of that
opinionated.
stuff like
Holy
ever.
smokes.
What am I going to do? I have it's like, okay, I'm just going to do this or that. I want conversations about everything all the time. I want you to be
Hmm.
in a comfortable space where you can talk and tell me your thoughts, and then we can bounce stuff off of each other. I get an opportunity to run shows around the world. I get to see talk to people that can afford a giant ticket. I can also talk to a family of four that are just happy to be there for
Mhm.
under $100. Um, it's different in different parts of the world.
Mhm.
In Europe, it's different. There's just different things that hopefully all the people are talking together. There's also enough. It's like anything else in the world. Um, Removing the greed from the equation, which I believe in every industry, but let's just leave it there for a sec. I do believe that there's enough smart people in the world, to your point, that will come up with a creative solution and that are going to look out for everybody and go, what about this? And I just think that we're in a space now where people are going, because of the microscope, so where people are going, yeah, we'll either listen now or actually, yeah, that is a better system. But to your point, I think people are still trying to create that system and try to figure out how it's going to, or
Mhm.
where it's going to land and what's going to benefit the consumer, the artist, the promoter, and then it affects everybody. And that's in film and TV. It's about
Mhm.
every single industry. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It's not, there's nothing off limits on this thing. This is two people hanging out talking against a bookshelf and a brick wall, and that's what this point of the show is, which is having people on to talk about their life and talk about their thoughts. And to me, that's what makes podcasting great, especially when a guy like myself who has no broadcasting experience has an
Mhm.
opportunity to talk to somebody like yourself. I learn from
It's
every
great.
single show that I do, and I appreciate
Well,
you teaching me
it's
today.
interesting because you have on the screen, "What will you do next?" And it sort
Yeah,
of dovetails into this conversation, which for me, challenging mainstream leaders to do things differently is of great interest to me. I've had a few opportunities in the last little while to be brought into companies and help problem solve and challenge people in the room to think differently. And I hope I get an opportunity to do more of that because I think that there are many leaders who are surrounded by people who are afraid to speak up because they don't want to lose their jobs. So
sure.
their company is sort of status quo, and it's they're going to lose their staff, they're going to lose their momentum. So hopefully that's something that is of great interest to me. But I also am interested now in going back into the world of broadcast in some capacity and reignite my talent for doing interviews and having conversations that are meaningful
Mm,
with people. It's a tough ask because media is crumbling, and it's sort of like, why would you
mhm.
want to jump on that sinking ship? And I don't think mainstream media would want me anyway. So I'm starting to think about, like, what kind of interesting organization can use my skills with interviewing and moderating and hosting events, live events. So I'm just trying to, like, think differently and solve that problem, which is an exciting one for me, which is, how do you take these unique, disparate, and unusual skills that I've acquired over the years of innovation, question asking, conversation making, comfortable in front of a camera and a mic, and turn that into a career.
Well, there's more opportunities than ever. I mean, the thing is that not everybody has your experience. So you have an opportunity to just go ahead and jump right in where other people have to, like, I mean, geez, I'm 120 episodes in. I'm still
Hmm.
fumbling my way around, but I'm smarter now than I was at episode
Right.
1 or episode 10, whereas some of these kids are already making $1,000 a month on TikTok just by posting videos of their dog. Like, people are finding their way of doing it, but you being able to have a show and taking your experience into it, um, I'm not going to say it's going to be easier for you. What I'm going to say is that you will at least. I know that you're going to come out with like all your tools, and it's going to come out swinging, and your chance of success at that, at least whether it's an independent show from your basement,
No,
a
that's not what I want
studio,
to do.
whether you
Don't
got to
want
go
to do that.
downtown, you
I
want to
want
do a
to
bigger
do
thing.
something
Yeah.
where I want to be part of a corporation's vision. I want to be the voice of a
Mm,
corporation, a company, a brand who is looking to make a splash in the media world, and they need someone that they can trust to be the face of it. We would have to have shared values. There needs to
Sure.
be whatever their purpose, because the best brands, the best corporations are purpose-driven brands. I mean, they could be selling widgets, but there's some sort of a purpose behind what they're doing. And so I believe that there's amazing opportunity to partner with a brand who wants to make a difference in the world, spark conversation about something, and needs someone who has the skill to actually create a conversation that will be meaningful, intelligent, and entertaining. That's a hard mix. And I can do that.
It is. But aren't there more options now
Well, there's too many options now.
to find? Well, I
There's
was
too
going to say
many.
too many, but there are more options now to find that for you and say, well, these are at least the 30 that I think are doing it, and then how can
Yes.
I fit in? I would imagine that part of it would be at least there's a few more options to look at and decide who you want to
You know
connect
what?
to,
Life
right?
is about going out and asking for what you want. It's another thing that I speak about. Like when I have
Yeah.
keynote, when I get booked for keynotes, it's one of those, well, Erica, that's kind of obvious. But if it's so obvious, why aren't you doing it? People always ask me, well, how did you get that job? Or how did you end up there? And I always answer with, well, I asked. And I also will
Mm,
add to that, that for every time I ask, I get turned down probably 50 times at least. And I'm Erica frickin' M, and I get turned down all
yeah.
the time. And I have to get up and not take it personally, water off a duck's back, and go and ask someone
Sure.
else. And that's how you achieve success, is you just keep on putting yourself out there.
So can I ask then before I let you go? Can I ask about um, coming out of much music? Then did you feel when you left at the peak? You said, did you feel though that you're ready, you can accomplish anything, and then the first time you were told no and turned down, how did that feel?
Oh, I've been turned down many times before my time at Much.
I'm just saying coming out of much, it's like, okay, I feel great. This is the peak. I feel like I've accomplished everything at much.
Mm,
I'm a personality. People are tuning in for me. Uh, but I'm gonna, either
mhm,
manifest
mhm.
this new job I'm gonna get, or you go into it thinking that maybe you have it. Was there a moment there, and this is more of a
Mm,
lesson for the listener and the watcher, where you're like, I think I got this, and then you were turned down, and then you had to kind of restart and go, wait a minute, what the fuck? Why was I
yeah.
turned down?
I think
What?
that
What?
I have many, many, many of those stories, to be honest. It kind
Sure.
of feels like
Yeah.
you've just been punched in the stomach, kind of feel nauseous, and um, like, yeah, someone kicked you in the stomach or something, and a little bit dazed. And it's not
Mm,
because I used to be Erica M. It's just that feeling of they don't get it. Don't they see? Don't they understand? And I've had to learn that something that my ex-husband said to me that still rings true. He said to me a long time ago, he had a way with words, there's a seat for every toilet. And there is a lot of truth in
what?
that, which is when you put yourself out and you can see the fit. I can see myself in that role, or I can see myself fitting in somewhere, and the other people turn me down. It's not because I'm not good, and it's not because they're assholes necessarily in either case. It's often because they don't see that I'm good because it's not the right fit. We're not on the same plane. And
Right.
I use that, by the way, even when I get kicked in the stomach and told no. To me, my philosophy is that is the beginning of a relationship if I